In 2007, groundbreaking Japanese kickboxing promotion K1 attempted to get into the MMA game. Seeing the UFC's success, the company looked to break ground in the United States with a card of epic proportions. Instead, what we would see was a debacle, a prime example of how not to run a professional fighting event. Now, going to fight night, there was a host of issues, some that we'll get into in this video, but one thing that K1 Dynamite USA did was they booked a pretty strong card. The co-main event was a legendary battle between Kazushi Sakuraba and Royce Gracie, a rematch to their famous fight that saw Sakuraba beat Gracie. The first fight of the card featured an NFL player, former NFL player, who once played college football in that very stadium. That stadium that they booked the venue in, the LA Coliseum, a famed venue in its own right. And the main event, well, they booked big for the main event. Perhaps the biggest. And that's WWE champion, former NCAA wrestling champion, Brock Lesnar. At the time, the Minnesota native was at the height of his newfound fame. He had put Big Show through the ring, wrestled at WrestleMania, and now MMA was next, and K1 had been teasing his debut for nearly a year. Fans were skeptical of the company ever since they teased a quote-unquote super fight between Mike Tyson and Bob Sapp that never materialized. Lesnar, though, would eventually get in the ring. Originally, he was meant to face kickboxer Hangman Choi, another giant at over 7 feet, 300 pounds. But after medical tests revealed a tumor on Choi's head, the fight was put into question. And now this is where the fight, or this is where the event, things start getting crazy. All the way up to the day of the event. So Hangman Choi, well, my man had gigantism. So the tumor that they found on his brain, well, that's something that's normal for people with gigantism. So he was cool with it. All right, everything was cool. He wanted a fight, and everything was supposedly good to go. Choi would just need a quick MRI for a checkup, but due to his size, he didn't fit the one the medical staff had available at the time. Instead, he'd have to get an MRI from outside, which was a little unreliable, and that one returned back some alarming results. So Choi would be scrapped from the card. He tried to argue that he was good to fight, but out of an abundance of caution and his head just being too big for the doctor's equipment, staff would have to listen to the external tests. It would effectively make him the first fighter scratched from a card for being too large for the medical equipment. Now, all that happened a few weeks before the actual event took place. All cool, right? All good? We'll find another opponent. Well, yeah, K1 tried to find another opponent, but they never told the fans. So basically, all the way up until fight night, they scrambled to find another opponent, not telling fans that Hangman Choi wouldn't be the guy fighting Brock Lesnar. Instead, Lesnar would be matched against a Judo Olympic silver medalist, Korea's Min-Soo Kim. At this time, though, Kim was a glorified punching bag for K1 and their foreign talent. He was 2-5 and had suffered losses to fighters like Bob Sapp, Mighty Mo, and Don Fry. So with that minor hiccup out the way, it was time for fight night, and let's give them credit. K1 booked an absolute spectacle. There would be a wild opening ceremony that would feature the wild man himself, Dennis Rodman. For some reason, he was used heavily in the promotion for the event, repeatedly taking shots at the UFC.
UFC? Fuck that.
Well, K1 had Rodman carry this Olympic torch to the ring. Bill Goldberg on the announcer's table? I mean, that Bill Goldberg? Well, he wasn't impressed.
Hey, is that a hula hoop Rodman's got in his ear?
That's the worm, Dennis Rodman, involved in one of the weirdest torch ceremonies I've ever seen. I don't know, what would you think of Dennis Rodman, Olympic athlete?
In what?
Well, basketball.
I think
One of the best rebounders the sport's ever seen.
I think he'd be terrific.
There you go.
The madness wouldn't end there. What we saw was 2 hours of subpar fights mixed in with spectacular entrances. There were drum performances, fireworks, pyro, people were shooting off confetti guns, people were shooting off real guns. And I think right now is the perfect time to introduce you to the man known as DJ Hopper. Now, if you go to a regional MMA event, chances are there will be a DJ playing music in between fights. Sometimes they get on the mic and they try to hype up the crowd, but it's extremely rare at large events, and extremely rare for the DJ to be doing commentary during the fights. On this night, DJ Hopper angered everyone in attendance, from fellow commentators to the fans. He beckoned fans to boo, tried to rile them up, and attempted to get them to be disrespectful to the fighters, and eventually was told to shut up by those in attendance. Now for the actual fights, the first fight of the night featured the MMA debut of former NFL player Johnny Morton. Before retiring from pro football, Morton had spent 12 seasons in the NFL. He also played football for the USC Trojans, who played their home games at the LA Coliseum. Footage of Morton training was played before the fight while he talked about being used to pain. He also said MMA was safer than playing football because there was only one man coming for him, whereas in football you have to worry about getting blindsided by several people. I wonder if my man feels the same way now. The fight itself didn't last long. Morton started off by rushing his opponent with some sloppy strikes, backing him up into the ring ropes before getting slept with an overhand right. It was just 30 seconds into round 1. After the fight, Morton could be heard snoring, while one person was yelling, "Johnny, say something," as he had a neck brace placed on him.
Be a world-class fighter. You have to put your time in.
No, what Johnny, again, needed to do is kind of go into some of the bigger, smaller shows.
Now the event will continue for 2 more hours with just some boring fights, some overmatched fights. All in that time, DJ Hopper will make a fool out of himself. When we get to the co-main event, one of the fights that a lot of the fans were looking forward to, that's Kazushi Sakuraba against Royce Gracie. That would also be a snore, because it would be 3 rounds of both guys just grappling each other. The decision going to Royce Gracie. Throughout the fight, fans were booing. DJ Hopper was saying Royce Gracie's name wrong.
Royce Gracie!
It was a mess. Finally, after hours of craziness, we reached the big moment, the main event. Brock Lesnar versus Min Soo Kim. Wrestling champion versus Olympic silver medalist. A clash of titans. And this too would be a disappointment. In round 1, the American would let his wrestling instincts take over as he'd take down his Korean opponent, securing full mount and punching him till he'd submit. It would just take a few punches for Kim to quit. The fight would last just over a minute, making it an anticlimactic ending to a night that had a lot of promise but little payoff. For K1, 40,000 people were in attendance, and it was announced as California's largest crowd ever for an MMA event. Sounds pretty good, right? Not really. That's because the company had planned and printed tickets for over 75,000 people. Out of the 40,000 in attendance, only 3,000 tickets were sold to paying fans. The company paid for the rest themselves. The fighters' payroll alone was just over $1 million, and the live gate alone, well, that just drew $200,000. Add the cost of the venue, marketing, concessions, and the wild fireworks display, it's safe to say the company lost millions. So it was a pretty bad night for K1 as a whole, right? I mean, to make matters worse, 3 fighters after the event ended up failing their post-fight drug tests. Interestingly enough, one of those fighters was our boy Johnny Morton, the dude who was talking all that crap. Well, he took steroids and still got slept. The night would be a successful one for the man who would one day be called the UFC heavyweight champion. That's Brock Lesnar. Brock would sign with the UFC for his very next fight, and though he'd lose, he would successfully hold gold within the next 2 years. Dynamite USA was a really rough event on many levels. The fights were underwhelming for the most part, and they were mostly one-sided and not really competitive. On top of that, you had to deal with DJ Hopper. Still, it's a historic moment, not just because for the debut of Brock, but for what it tried to be. I really liked the production elements, and I think it was a great part of early MMA. The time when the fighters could have their own trunks, their own entrances. There was more personality. It was less of a business. As a new company in any industry or in any new territory, you've got to make some gambles to have some success. K1 might not have succeeded with Dynamite USA in a business sense, but it still has a lot of people talking to this day.
Every time I wake up, shit feel the same. Got a million thoughts and they weighing on my brain. Sipping on my favorite liquor just to ease the pain, cause I feel like I'm crazy and desperate need to change. Making plans to move and talking state to state. Talking pounds and haze, medical high grade. Look how my eyes stay, what more can I say? How dare a nigga tell me that this rap won't work?